The plasma bolts whistled past Garland's head as he dove behind what remained of the defensive barrier. His tactical scanner displayed a devastating truth. They were outnumbered 3-1. The Zithran assault force had them pinned down on this desolate moon, and there was nowhere left to retreat. Commander Sergeant Morrison's voice crackled through the comm. "The evacuation pods are ready, but we need 5 more minutes." 5 minutes. Garland checked his weapons charge indicator, 30% remaining. Around him, his remaining squad members were in similar states, their armor scorched and systems failing. They had fought valiantly, but this battle was lost. "Move out," Garland ordered, laying down suppressing fire. "I'll cover you." "Sir, you can't." "That's an order." As his team retreated, Garland watched the Zithran warriors advance with their characteristic fluid movements, their crystalline armor refracting the alien sunlight into rainbow patterns. Beautiful and deadly, these beings had been humanity's enemies for over 2 decades, ever since first contact had gone catastrophically wrong. He had held them off long enough. The evacuation pods were away, his people safe. Now it was just him alone against an entire assault squadron. Garland raised his hands in surrender as the purple-skinned aliens surrounded him. The journey to the Zithran homeworld was a blur of stasis fields and energy restraints. When Garland awoke, he found himself in a cell that defied human understanding of architecture. The walls curved in impossible directions, and gravity seemed to bend at odd angles. Through a translucent barrier, he could see the sprawling city beyond, towering spires that twisted like living things. Vehicles that floated on streams of light, and everywhere the graceful forms of the Zithrans going about their daily lives. He had been here for 3 weeks when the guards came for him. They spoke no words, merely activated their control devices, and Garland felt compulsion fields guiding his movements. He walked through corridors that shifted and changed around him, past chambers filled with incomprehensible technology and artwork that hurt to look at directly. The throne room was vast beyond measure. Pillars of crystallized light stretched up into darkness, and the floor was a mirror-smooth surface that reflected not just images, but emotions. At the far end, on a throne that seemed carved from a single massive diamond, sat Queen Thelene. Garland had never seen her before, but he knew her reputation. The Iron Queen, they called her, the architect of humanity's defeats. She was younger than he had expected, perhaps equivalent to 30 human years, with skin the color of amethyst and hair that moved like liquid mercury. Her eyes were completely black without iris or pupil, yet he felt them boring into him with an intensity that made his spine crawl. "Garland of Earth." She spoke, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in his bones. "Do you know why you're here?" He stood straight, refusing to show fear. "I assume it's not for a peace treaty." A ripple of amusement passed through the assembled courtiers. Queen Thelene's expression remained cold. "You led the assault on Kepler Station. 17 of my warriors died. They were soldiers, as was I, as were the 300 civilians your forces slaughtered at New Geneva." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Several courtiers stepped back, and Garland noticed the guards tightening their grips on their weapons. "You dare bring up New Geneva?" The Queen's control cracked slightly, revealing seething anger beneath. "Your people fired first. They were explorers, scientists, children." Garland interrupted. "Your forces opened fire on a research vessel." "Enough." The single word carried such force that it physically pressed Garland to his knees. "You will not speak of matters you do not understand. You are here to answer for your crimes, nothing more." The trial, if it could be called that, was a foregone conclusion. Witnesses testified to Garland's tactical brilliance, to the effectiveness of the ambush that had cost so many Zithran lives. No one spoke of the military necessity of the fact that Kepler Station had been a staging ground for raids on human colonies. Justice, it seemed, was a one-sided affair. When the verdict came, Garland listened without flinching. "Death, Queen," Thelene pronounced. "But not quickly. You will understand what those 17 families lost. You will understand what it means to suffer." The torture chambers beneath the palace were a testament to centuries of refined cruelty. The Zitherans had elevated pain to an art form, and their technology allowed them to push the boundaries of what the physical form could endure without dying. Day after day, they worked on Garland with methodical precision. He never broke. Not when they invaded his mind with telepathic probes trying to extract military secrets. Not when they replayed holographic recordings of human defeats, forcing him to watch his comrades die in slow motion. Not when they brought him to the brink of death, only to heal him and start again. It was during the second week of his torment that everything changed. The attack came at dawn when the palace defenses were being rotated. Garland heard the explosions from his cell, felt the structure shudder. Alert klaxons wailed and emergency lights bathed everything in pulsing crimson. Through his cracked ribs and swollen eyes, he saw shadows moving in the corridor. Not guards, these moved differently, with the lethal purpose of trained assassins. The cell door flew open, its mechanisms fried by some kind of electromagnetic pulse weapon. "Human," one of the figures hissed in accented standard. "Where is the queen?" Garland said nothing. Even through his pain, he could see these weren't rescuers. The tactical gear they wore bore no insignia, and their faces were hidden behind masks that distorted light around them. "Tell us, and you die quickly," another demanded. Still silence. They raised their weapons, but before they could fire, another explosion rocked the facility. Stone and metal rained down as emergency barriers slammed into place. The assassins cursed and moved on, leaving Garland surprisingly free. He should have run. Every tactical bone in his body screamed at him to find an exit to escape while chaos reigned. Instead, he found himself stumbling through the corridors, moving toward the sound of battle. He found them in the Great Hall, 3 assassins facing off against the Queen's personal guard. The Zitharan warriors were skilled, but they were being overwhelmed. Bodies lay scattered across the marble floor, purple blood mixing with the strange colorless ichor of the attackers. Queen Theline stood in the center of it all, her ceremonial blade dancing in her hands. She was magnificent and terrible, every movement, a lethal work of art. But she was tiring, and the assassins were closing in. Garland saw the sniper an instant before the shot. Perched on a damaged balcony, the figure raised a weapon that hummed with barely contained energy. The Queen was focused on the immediate threats, unaware of death approaching from above. He moved without thinking. The energy beam seared the air where the Queen had been standing. Garland's tackle carried them both behind a fallen pillar as the stone where they'd stood turned to glass and smoke. "Why?" she gasped, staring at him with those endless black eyes. He had no answer. He had acted on instinct, on some deeper compulsion he didn't understand. The battle raged around them. More assassins had appeared, and the palace guards were falling back. In desperation, the Queen reached for something at her throat, a crystalline device that pulsed with inner light. "Come to me," she commanded in the ancient tongue of her people. "Vorthak, answer your Queen's call." The response was immediate and terrifying. The floor cracked and split as something enormous forced its way up from the depths below. The assassins stopped their advance, staring in shock as a nightmare-given form emerged into the Great Hall. The guardian beast was larger than any living thing Garland had ever seen. Its body was a fusion of organic and mechanical elements, covered in scales that shifted color like oil on water. Multiple eyes, each the size of a human head, tracked independently across the battlefield. Its mouth opened to reveal teeth like crystal daggers, and its roar shook the very foundations of the palace. But it didn't move to defend its queen. Instead, it stood frozen, its massive head turning back and forth as if searching for something. Queen Theline's face went white. "Vorthak, protect your queen." "Nothing." The beast remained motionless as the assassins regrouped, their initial shock wearing off. "Impossible," one of the courtiers whispered. "The Guardian only responds to royal blood. It must—" "Shut them down!" Garland shouted suddenly. the words ripping from his throat with surprising force. "Stop those assassins now!" The guardian beast's head snapped toward him, all eyes focusing with laser intensity. Then, with fluid grace that belied its size, it launched itself across the hall. The assassins had time for exactly one scream before tons of crystallized death crushed them into paste. The silence that followed was profound. Every eye in the hall was fixed on Garland human Zitharin and the multitude of alien eyes belonging to the guardian beast. "How?" Queen Theline's voice was barely a whisper. "How did you command Vorthek?" Dr. Jalen, the court's chief geneticist, approached with something approaching awe. "Your Majesty, this is impossible. The Guardian's loyalty is hard-coded into its genetic structure. It recognizes and responds only to the quantum signature unique to royal bloodline. No outsider should be able—" "Test him," the Queen interrupted. "Now." The blood sample was taken with more reverence than Garland thought appropriate. He watched as Dr. Jalen fed N into a device that looked like a sculpture of twisted light and shadow. Results flickered across holographic displays in symbols he couldn't read, but their meaning was clear enough from the reactions around him. Dr. Jalen's hands shook as he interpreted the data. "Your Majesty, the human carries genetic markers. Markers that shouldn't exist. Ancient Zitharin sequences, dormant recessive traits that date back to the old empire. But that's—" "Impossible," the Queen finished. "Yes, you keep saying that." She turned to Garland, her expression unreadable. "It seems that human, that you carry more than just the blood of Earth in your veins. The question is how?" The answer came 3 days later, after Dr. Jalen had run every test in his considerable arsenal. The truth was so improbable that it took multiple confirmations before anyone would believe it. 2,000 years ago, Dr. Jalen explained to the assembled court. During the reign of Emperor Valdris III, an expedition was sent to explore the far reaches of the galaxy. They never returned. The records suggest they discovered a world in what you humans now call the Sol system, a world called Earth. Queen Theline's face had gone through several shades of purple during the explanation. "You're suggesting that humans are descended from our people?" "Oh, not exactly, Your Majesty. The evidence suggests a small number of Zitharin explorers became stranded on Earth. Over millions of your planet's years, they interbred with the developing native species. Most of the Zitharin genetic markers were lost or suppressed, but in rare cases—" All eyes turned to Garland, who felt distinctly uncomfortable with the attention. "In rare cases, those ancient genes resurface. Commander Garland carries enough concentrated Zitharin ancestry to register as royal blood to the Guardian sensors. It's 1 in billions of billions chance, but here we are." The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just another alien species, they were distant cousins, children of the same genetic tree. It recontextualized the entire war, the hatred, the centuries of conflict. "The question now," Queen Theline said slowly, "is what we do with this knowledge." Lord Vexer, the Queen's primary military advisor, stepped forward. His scarred face bore testament to a lifetime of warfare. "Your Majesty, regardless of his unusual heritage, this human is still responsible for the deaths of 17 of our warriors. The law is clear." "The law," the Queen mused. "Yes, the law is very clear. It states that any being carrying royal blood cannot be executed without a trial by the full council. A trial that could take years to convene." Garland could practically hear Lord Vexer's teeth grinding. "Surely Your Majesty doesn't intend to—" "I intend to follow the law, Lord Vexer, as should we all." She looked at Garland with calculating eyes. "Until such time as the council can convene, the human will remain in the palace. He will be assigned quarters appropriate to his status." "And the guardian beast?" Dr. Jalen asked nervously. "Will remain with him," the Queen decided, "since Vorthak seems to have developed an attachment to our cousin." The next months were surreal. Garland found himself installed in chambers that would have housed nobility on Earth. The rooms were a bewildering mix of comfort and strangeness. furniture that adjusted itself to his presence, walls that displayed artistic scenarios that changed with his moods, and a bathroom that seemed to understand hygiene better than he did. Vorthok was a constant companion. The massive guardian beast had apparently decided that Garland was its new priority, following him everywhere within the palace. Servants fled when they approached, and more than once, Garland had to prevent the creature from eating someone who had looked at him the wrong way. "Easy, big fellow," he would say, and the beast would rumble something that might have been contentment. Queen Theline visited irregularly always, with a full retinue of guards and courtiers. Their conversations were carefully polite, two predators circling each other and looking for weakness. "How do you find your accommodations?" she asked during one such visit. "Comfortable," Garland replied, "though I notice the doors don't open from the inside. A security precaution, I'm sure you understand." "Of course. Just as I'm sure you understand my concern about the progress of this trial you mentioned." Her smile was sharp. "These things take time. Protocols must be observed." It was Lord Vexer who finally made his move. Garland had been expecting it. The military advisor made no secret of his hatred for the human interloper. What he hadn't expected was how clumsy the attempt would be. The assassin came in the night, slipping through what should have been impenetrable defenses. Probably with inside help, Garland thought, as he rolled away from the energy blade that would have separated his head from his shoulders. The fight was brief but violent. The assassin was skilled, but he hadn't counted on Vorthak. The guardian beast had been resting in the chamber's alcove, apparently dormant. The sounds of conflict brought it instantly alert, and the assassin disappeared down the creature's throat with a surprised squawk. "Well," said Queen Theline when she arrived moments later, flanked by her guards, "this is interesting." She examined the evidence with the thoroughness of someone who had dealt with palace intrigue before. The breached security systems, the timing, the level of access required, all of it pointed to someone with high-level clearance. "Lord Vexer," she said without looking at him, "you will confine yourself to quarters pending investigation." "Your Majesty, surely you don't believe?" "I believe evidence, Lord Vexer. And the evidence suggests someone very high in our command structure wanted the human dead." She looked directly at him then. "Someone who perhaps forgot that an attack on royal blood is an attack on the crown itself." The investigation that followed was swift and efficient. Within days, a trail of bribes, coercion, and conspiracy led directly to several high-ranking officials with Lord Vexer at its center. The depth of the plot was staggering. It wasn't just about Garland. It was a full coup attempt with the human's death meant to be the opening move. They planned to blame the humans, Dr. Jalen explained to Garland during one of their sessions. "Your death would have been portrayed as an escape attempt, proof that even seeming cooperation was just another human deception. It would have given them justification to escalate military action, to declare martial law. And Queen Theline would have been relegated to a figurehead role with the military council assuming real power." The doctor shook his head. "Your presence, and especially your connection to Vorthek, disrupted their entire timeline. The trial of the conspirators was swift and brutal. Zitharan justice did not include appeals or lengthy deliberations. Lord Vexer and his co-conspirators were executed publicly, their deaths serving as a warning to others who might harbor similar ambitions." Through it all, Garland found his relationship with Queen Theline evolving in unexpected ways. The formal hostility softened into grudging respect, and then into something that might have been friendship if they hadn't been members of warring species. "You could have run," she said one evening as they walked through the palace gardens. Vorthak followed at a respectful distance, occasionally snapping at floating insects that strayed too close to them. "Not really. Your people are fairly thorough about security. I mean, when the attack came. When Lord Vexer's assassins struck, you could have let them succeed." Garland considered this. "Your death wouldn't have helped anyone. Probably would have made things worse." "Worse for whom?" She stopped beside a fountain that played with streams of luminescent liquid. "Your people hate me. I am the architect of dozens of military defeats. The Iron Queen, they call me. My people hate war. You're just a symbol? And you, do you hate me? The question hung between them like a challenge. Garland looked at her, really looked. Not at the queen, not at the enemy, but at the person. She was younger than he'd realized, probably thrust into power before she was ready. The lines of constant stress around her eyes, the way she held herself ready for attack. Even in her own garden, the loneliness that came from being surrounded by people who wanted something from you. I hate what this war has cost, he said finally. The people it's killed. The fear it's created. But you personally, I'm beginning to think you're as much a victim of circumstance as anyone. Something shifted in her expression. Circumstance, I choose every military action. I approve every raid. Do you? Or do you approve what your advisors recommend? React to what they tell you human forces are doing. He gestured around them. This whole palace is built on protocol and tradition. How much of what you do is really your choice? She was quiet for a long time. More than you might think, less than I would like. Then maybe we should talk about that. The conversations that followed were unlike anything either of them had expected. Away from the formal protocols of court, they began to understand each other not as queen and prisoner, but as two people caught in a conflict neither had chosen. The war started before I was born, she said one night as they shared a meal in his chambers. My father fought it, and his father before him. I inherited not just a throne, but a hatred I never questioned. And I inherited a uniform and orders to fight aliens who wanted to kill everyone I cared about. Garland replied, neither of us asked for this, but we're the ones who have to deal with it. She gestured to Vorthak, who was destroying what looked like a sculpture, but was actually his dinner. Even him, bred to protect royalty, never given a choice about whom to serve. Except now he has been. He chose me. Garland reached out cautiously to stroke one of the beast's smaller heads. Vorthak rumbled approvingly. Maybe that means something. The breakthrough came 6 months after Garland's arrival. Queen Thelene burst into his chambers, her usual composure cracked. The humans have sent an envoy, she said without preamble. They want to negotiate. Garland sat up straighter. What kind of negotiation? Prisoner exchange. They offer 100 captured Zithran warriors in exchange for 1 human commander. She looked at him meaningfully. You. The offer changed everything. Suddenly, Garland wasn't just a curiosity or a political problem. He was a valuable asset. The various court factions that had been content to ignore him now had very definite opinions about what should be done. Trade him immediately, counseled Admiral Threx. 100 warriors returned is worth more than any intelligence we might extract. Keep him, argued Dr. Jalen. His unique genetics could unlock secrets about our ancient history. Execute him and send them his head, suggested General Korth. Show them that taking our people prisoner has consequences. Queen Thelene listened to them all with growing frustration. Finally, she raised a hand for silence. The decision is not yours to make, she said with deadly calm. I will consider all options and render judgment. That night she came to Garland alone. No guards, no retinue, just her and a small sidearm that she probably didn't think he'd noticed. They want you back, she said without preamble. So I heard. What do you want? The question surprised him. What do I want? I want this war to end. I want to go home. I want to stop watching people die for causes they barely understand. You could help with that. She moved to the window that looked out over the city. If you went back, you could be an ambassador. You understand us, now know we're not the monsters your people believe us to be. Are you asking me to leave? She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. I'm giving you the choice. And if I choose to stay, then you stay. The negotiation fails, the war continues. She turned back to him. And you remain here in comfortable captivity while both our peoples continue to die. It was manipulation, and they both knew it. But it was also truth. There might be another way, Garland said slowly, such as, I go back, but not as just an ambassador, as proof. He gestured to Vorthak, who was pretending to sleep in the corner. I take him with me. Show them that humans and Zitherans aren't so different, that cooperation is possible. Her laugh was bitter. You want to take my guardian beast, the symbol of royal power. My people would see it as the ultimate insult. And my people would see it as the ultimate proof. Think about it, a Zitharan war beast choosing to protect a human, following him into what they'd see as enemy territory. It's exactly the kind of impossible thing that might make people reconsider their assumptions. The debate in the Royal Council was vicious. Half wanted Garland executed for the audacity of the suggestion. The other half wanted him executed for different reasons. Only Queen Thaline's personal intervention prevented bloodshed in the chamber itself. You ask me to give up Vorthak, Duke Zenthar protested. The guardian beast that has protected the royal line for 1,000 years. Send it into the hands of our enemies. I ask you to trust, Queen Thaline replied. Trust that sometimes the most dangerous path is the only one that leads to peace. In the end, it came down to a vote. The council was split exactly down the middle, which meant the Queen's word was decisive. I choose to risk, she said simply. The preparations took weeks. Special environmental suits had to be constructed for Vorthak. The Guardian could survive in space, but human ships weren't designed for creatures of its size. Diplomatic protocols had to be established. Messages sent and received, guarantees negotiated on both sides. Through it all, Garland felt torn. The rational part of him knew this was necessary, that it might be the first step toward ending a war that had cost millions of lives. But another part, a part he was reluctant to examine too closely, didn't want to leave. You're scared? Queen Thaline said on his last night in the palace. They stood on the observation deck looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, a human ship was waiting to take him home. Of course I'm scared. I'm about to fly into space with a 20-foot alien beast and try to convince two species to stop murdering each other. Who wouldn't be scared? That's not what I mean. He sighed. No, it's not. She moved closer, close enough that he could smell the strange, clean scent that all Zitherans seemed to carry. When you go back, you'll be a hero. The man who ended the war. You'll have everything you ever wanted. Will I? Won't you? The question hung between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross. I'll miss this, he said finally. The conversations. He gestured vaguely. This. And I'll miss having someone who sees me as a person first and a queen second. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the alien constellations wheel overhead. Don't let them make you into a symbol, she said eventually. When you get back, don't let them use you for things you don't believe in. Same to you. Don't let the court turn this into something warlike. Use it as a foundation for peace. I'll try. Promise me. She looked at him with those endless black eyes. I promise. If you promise me something in return. What? Come back. Someday when the war is over and the universe is quieter, come back and tell me how it all turned out. The human ship was smaller than he'd expected, a diplomatic vessel, not a warship. The crew stared at him with a mixture of awe and suspicion, and their faces went pale when Vorthak emerged from the shuttle. Captain Sarah Mitchell, the ship's commander, was the first to recover. Commander Garland, I'm here to take you home. Home? He repeated the word, feeling strange on his tongue. Is that thing safe? The captain asked, eyeing Vorthak nervously. Safer than we are, Garland replied. He doesn't like violence unless someone threatens me. The journey back to Earth took 3 weeks. Garland spent most of it in debriefing sessions, explaining everything that had happened. The intelligence officers were particularly interested in Zitharan military capabilities, but Garland found himself reluctant to share anything that might be used offensively. You understand, these people are our enemies. Colonel Harrison asked during one particularly tense session. I understand that's what we've believed, Garland replied carefully. I also understand that belief might be wrong. Word of his return had preceded him. When their ship entered Sol space, they found a reception committee waiting dozens of warships, news vessels, and transport craft. Earth's orbital stations were decorated with welcome banners, and the communication channels buzzed with constant chatter. We're ordered to dock at Luna Station, Captain Mitchell announced. There's going to be a ceremony. Garland's heart sank. A ceremony meant speeches, meant politicians, meant turning him into exactly what Queen Thelene had warned him against, becoming a symbol. The ceremony was as awful as he'd expected. Fleet Admiral Chen, who had somehow forgotten to mention that Luna Station had been built using salvaged Zitharan technology, gave a speech about human resilience and determination. Governor Martinez talked about the need to maintain military readiness. Senator Yates used the opportunity to promote his latest military funding bill. Through it all, Garland sat on the stage trying to look appropriately grateful while mentally composing the real speech he wanted to give. When they finally called him to the podium, he abandoned his prepared remarks entirely. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, for 20 years we've been fighting a war based on a misunderstanding. The murmur from the crowd was immediate. Admiral Chen's face went red. The Zitharans are not the monsters we've believed them to be. They are people different from us in appearance and culture, but people nonetheless. They have families, dreams, fears. They love their children and mourn their dead. Commander Garland, Admiral Chen interrupted, perhaps you're still suffering from the effects of captivity. I'm suffering from the effects of clarity, Garland shot back. I've seen both sides of this war now. I've seen what we're really fighting for and what we're fighting against. And I'm here to tell you that it needs to stop. The uproar that followed made rational discussion impossible. Half the audience was on their feet cheering, the other half was booing. Admiral Chen looked like he was considering having Garland arrested for treason. It was Vorthak who restored order. The guardian beast, who had been lurking at the edge of the stage, suddenly reared up to its full height and roared a sound that made the station's hull vibrate. The silence that followed was absolute. Thank you, Garland said dryly. As I was saying, the real work began after the ceremony. Behind closed doors in committee meetings and private conferences, Garland found himself fighting a different kind of war. Politicians wanted to use him as propaganda. Military leaders wanted him to reveal Zitharan defenses. Intelligence officers wanted him to become a double agent. You're asking me to betray people who treated me with honor, he said during one particularly tense meeting with the Joint Chiefs. We're asking you to serve humanity, General Foster replied. I'm serving humanity. I'm trying to end a war that's killing us. Dr. Elizabeth Reyes, humanity's leading xenobiologist, became his strongest ally. She was fascinated by the genetic analysis he'd brought back, by the proof that humans and Zitharans were distantly related. This changes everything, she said, poring over the data. If we're truly connected to them, if we're originally from the same source, then this war isn't just wrong, it's fratricide. Try telling that to the Hawks, Garland muttered. The Hawks, as they'd come to be known, were the faction that wanted to continue military action. Led by Admiral Chen and Senator Yates, they argued that Garland's experience proved how cunning and manipulative the Zitharans could be. They turned him, Chen declared publicly, used their alien psychology to make him sympathetic to their cause. This genetic connection nonsense is just another layer of deception. The Doves, the peace faction, weren't much better. They wanted to use Garland as a symbol of inevitable victory, proof that humanity could conquer their enemies without even fighting. Neither side gets it, he complained to Captain Lisa Wong, one of the few people who seemed to understand what he was trying to do. This isn't about winning or losing. It's about recognizing that the whole premise of the war was wrong. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 3 months after Garland's return, long-range sensors detected a massive Zithran fleet approaching the outer system. Not attacking, approaching under flag of truce, broadcasting peaceful intentions in perfect standard English. "They want to talk," reported Intelligence Director Park. "And they're specifically asking for you." The meeting was arranged at Ceres Station in neutral space between the inner and outer systems. Garland was part of the human delegation, along with Admiral Chen, Senator Yates, Dr. Reyes, and a dozen other officials. When the Zithran ship docked, Garland felt his heart race. The airlock opened, and a familiar figure stepped through. Queen Theline looked exactly as he remembered her: regal, composed, beautiful, in an alien way that no longer seemed strange to him. She was flanked by guards and advisors, but her eyes found his immediately. "Commander Garland," she said formally, then smiled slightly. "You kept your promise." "Your Majesty," he replied, bowing slightly. "I said I'd try to change things." "And have you succeeded?" "Working on it." The negotiations that followed were unlike anything in human history. Over the course of weeks, both sides laid out their grievances, their fears, their hopes. The truth of the war's origins was finally revealed: a tragic cascade of misunderstandings, mistranslations, and aggressive reactions on both sides. 20 years, Senator Yates said, at one point, his voice hollow. 20 years of fighting over what was essentially a language barrier. "Not just a language barrier," Queen Theline corrected gently. "A barrier of understanding. We saw you as aggressive invaders. You saw us as hostile aliens. Neither of us stopped to consider that we might be afraid of each other." The turning point came when Dr. Reyes presented her genetic analysis to the combined delegation. The proof of humanity's Zithran heritage was irrefutable, and its implications staggering. "We are not just similar species," she explained. "We are literally family. Cousins separated by time and space, but still sharing the same root." Vorthak, who had been resting in a specially constructed chamber, was brought out as living proof. The great beast's acceptance of Garland, its protection of the human delegation, demonstrated better than any words that cooperation was possible. "The Guardian recognizes kinship," Queen Theline observed. "Perhaps we should do the same." The peace treaty took 6 months to negotiate. Every detail had to be argued, every clause debated. There were setbacks, moments when it seemed like the whole process would collapse. But gradually, painfully, an agreement took shape. The final document was signed on Luna Station 1 year and 3 months after Garland's return to human space. Representatives of both species put their names to a treaty that established not just an end to hostilities, but a framework for cooperation and exchange. "It's not perfect," Garland said to Queen Theline during the celebration that followed. "There will be incidents, misunderstandings, people on both sides who think we've gone too soft. But it's a beginning," she replied. "And sometimes that's enough." The implementations of the peace was every bit as challenging as the negotiation had been. Joint commissions had to be established. Trade agreements needed to be worked out. Most difficult of all, the military forces that had been fighting each other for 20 years had to be restructured for peacekeeping duties. Garland found himself at the center of it all, serving as a liaison between the two species. His unique experience made him invaluable, but it also made him a target. There were assassination attempts from both sides, humans who considered him a traitor, Zitharans who saw him as a corrupting influence. Each time Vorthak was there, the guardian beast had become more than a companion. It was a partner, friend, and protector. Its presence served as a constant reminder that the natural order wasn't as rigid as some believed. The first joint colony was established 2 years after the peace treaty. New Harmony, it was called, a settlement on a previously uninhabited world where humans and Zitharans could live and work together. Garland was there for the dedication ceremony, watching as children from both species played together while their parents nervously supervised. "Hard to believe they were enemies just a few years ago," Captain Wong observed. She'd been promoted to administrator of the Joint Fleet Operations, a role that required her to work closely with Zitharan commanders. "Were they, though?" Garland asked. nodding toward where a human child was showing a young Zitharan how to skip stones across a pond? Or were they just told they were? 5 years after the peace treaty, a historian named Dr. James Thompson published a comprehensive study of the war's origins. His conclusions were damning for both species. The tragedy, he wrote, was not that two alien species came into conflict. The tragedy was that they were never really strangers. Every death, every battle, every moment of suffering was the result of family members who had forgotten their connection. By then, the joint military commands had evolved into exploration fleets. Humans and Zitharans worked side by side, mapping new worlds, making contact with other species, expanding the boundaries of known space. The war machine had become an exploration machine, and both species were better for it. Garland, now holding the rank of admiral in the Joint Fleet, stood on the bridge of the Harmony, a ship that was itself a symbol of cooperation, Zitharan technology and human engineering, working in perfect synthesis. Beside him, Queen Thaleen, now simply. Thaleen, having passed governmental duties to elected councils, studied the star charts. "Long way from a prison cell on my homeworld," she observed. "Long way from anywhere," he agreed. "But I think we're heading in the right direction." Vorthak, now showing signs of age but still formidable, raised one of his heads from where he'd been resting on the bridge. The great beast fixed his multitude of eyes on Garland, and his rumbling might have been amusement. "I know, old friend," Garland said, reaching out to scratch behind a head that was nearly as large as his torso. "We've come a long way together." The exploration fleet was 3 weeks out from the nearest inhabited system when they made the discovery that would change everything once again. Long-range sensors detected structures that were clearly artificial, clearly ancient, and clearly not created by either humans or Zitharans. "How old, Thaleen?" asked Dr. Thompson, who had become the fleet's chief xenoarchaeologist. "Preliminary dating suggests at least 50,000 years," he replied, excitement evident in his voice. "These structures predate both our civilizations by tens of millennia." The first landing parties were joint teams, humans and Zitharans, working together to uncover the mysteries of an ancient site. What they found shook both species to their core. The ruins were obviously a city, but unlike anything either species had ever seen. The architecture suggested beings that were neither human nor Zitharan, yet somehow familiar to both. Most startling were the murals and inscriptions that covered many of the buildings. "They show 3 species," Dr. Thompson reported to the Joint Command. 3 peoples living together, working together, and 2 of them. The resemblance to early humans and proto-Zitharans is unmistakable. The implications were staggering. Not only were humans and Zitharans related, but other species had apparently lived alongside these mysterious others in some ancient golden age. What had happened to this third people? Why had the humans and Zitharans forgotten not just each other, but an entire species? The answers, when they came, were found in a structure that the team designated the archive. Unlike the other buildings, it had remained sealed, its entrances protected by technology that neither human nor Zitharan science could override. It was Vorthak who solved the puzzle, the guardian beast exploring the structure with the curiosity that age had not diminished, placed one massive paw on what seemed to be a simple decorative panel. The entire building responded, recognizing something in the beast's genetic structure that no one had expected. "He's older than we thought," Dr. Reyes said, studying new biological scans of Vorthak. "Much older. And his genetic structure includes markers from all 3 species, human, Zitharan, and something else." The archive opened to reveal a library of knowledge that spanned millennia. Holographic records, quantum data crystals, and information storage methods that transcended current technology. The story they told transformed everything. Both species thought they knew about their history. 50,000 years ago, this galaxy had been home to an alliance of 3 species. Humans were the explorers, always pushing outward to new worlds. Zitharans were the builders and organizers, creating the infrastructure that held the alliance together. And the others, the keepers, were the guardians of knowledge and the bridges between species. They created the guardians, Dr. Thompson explained, his voice filled with awe. The keepers, guardian beasts like Vorthak, were their living libraries designed to remember and preserve the connection between all three species. But something had gone wrong. The records spoke of a great catastrophe, a choosing that had split the alliance. The keepers had departed for destinations unknown, taking much of their knowledge with them. The humans and Zitherans, bereft of the bridges that had connected them, had gradually drifted apart and forgotten their shared heritage. Until now, Thelene said softly. The revelation changed everything once again. The peace between humans and Zitherans was no longer just an end to a foolish war, it was a restoration of something ancient and precious. And Vorthak was not just a guardian beast, but a living link to a time when three species had worked together for the betterment of all. He's been trying to bring us together all along, Garland realized, looking at the massive beast with new understanding. Not just obeying orders or following genetic programming, he remembered what we forgot. The search for the keepers became the new mission of the joint fleets. Using the star charts and navigation data found in the archive, human and Zitharan ships spread out across the galaxy, following trails that had grown cold over millennia. Years passed. Some expeditions found nothing but dead worlds and empty space. Others discovered ruins similar to the first sight, evidence that the three-species alliance had once spanned a significant portion of the galaxy. A few found hints that the keepers still existed somewhere waiting. Garland, now in his 50s, had never married. His life had been consumed by first war, then peace, then this new quest. But he had never been alone. Vorthak remained his constant companion, and his relationship with Thelene had evolved into something deeper than friendship, though neither had ever formally acknowledged it. Regrets? She asked him one evening as they watched the sunset on their latest world. Only one, he replied. That it took a war for us to find each other. All of us, she corrected, gesturing to include Vorthak. Human, Zitharan, and Guardian. The family that was always meant to be. The breakthrough came in the 15th year of peace. The exploration vessel, New Horizon, crewed by both species and carrying one of Vorthak's offspring, the old Guardian had sired young with other guardian beasts, creating a new generation of bridges between species, detected strange energy signatures in a previously unexplored sector. It's not natural, reported Captain Reyes, daughter of the famous xenobiologist. The patterns are too regular, too purposeful. What they found shattered every assumption about the keepers. The signals were coming from a massive structure, not a ship or a station, but something that defied classification. It was vast beyond measure, its crystalline surfaces reflecting stars that weren't visible to the naked eye. Its phase shifted, Dr. Thompson's successor explained, existing partially in our dimension and partially elsewhere. The first attempt at communication was answered immediately. The response came not through radio or quantum channels, but directly into the minds of everyone aboard the ship, human, Zitharan, and Guardian alike. We have been waiting, the voice said, gentle as a summer breeze and profound as the ocean. The children who forgot have remembered. The family separated by fear has chosen reunion. The time of restoration has come. The entity that spoke called itself the Last Keeper. It was ancient beyond measure, older than the original three-species alliance, and it had been waiting. Waiting for the humans and Zitharans to overcome their differences. Waiting for the Guardians to fulfill their purpose as bridges. Waiting for the family to be whole again. You have done well, it told them. The war was painful but necessary. It taught both species what they had lost. Only by losing connection could you appreciate its value. Only by experiencing separation could you understand unity. The revelations continued. The keepers hadn't departed. They had transcended, moving beyond physical existence while maintaining watch over their younger siblings. The guardian beasts were their gift to the future, designed to ensure that when the time was right, the old alliance could be restored. But the choice must be yours. The last keeper emphasized. We will not impose unity. It must be chosen, accepted, embraced by all. The decision was made jointly by both species and the guardians, who served as their bridge. Not just the political leaders and military commanders, but the people themselves, farmers and teachers, artists and engineers, all choosing to embrace something larger than themselves. The ceremony of restoration took place at the first discovery site, now transformed into a monument to cooperation. Representatives of every human and Zithran colony attended, along with the guardians who had helped make it all possible. We gather, Thelene announced, her voice carried to billions across thousands of worlds, not as separate species, but as one family reunion. Garland stepped forward, Vorthak beside him. The great beast was old now, his movements slower, but his presence still commanding. We choose, he said simply, to remember what we forgot, to embrace what we abandoned, to be what we were always meant to be. The moment they accepted, everything changed. Not physically, the universe looked the same, but suddenly, everyone present could feel it. The connection that had always existed, the bonds that went deeper than species or technology. Human minds touched Zithran consciousness, and both embraced the vast, patient presence of the keepers. Welcome home, the last keeper said, and for the first time in 50,000 years, the alliance was whole. Garland felt tears streaming down his face as the connection settled into place. Beside him, Thelene was weeping too, her hand in his. And Vorthak, dear old Vorthak, was purring like a cat the size of a house, all his eyes closed in apparent bliss. The new alliance wasn't like the old one. There were still three aspects: the human drive to explore, the Zithran gift for organization, and the keeper's wisdom, but they were no longer separate species. They were facets of a greater whole, connected at levels that transcended physical form. Years flowed by. Like Warwick water, the galaxy blossomed with new life, new art, new discoveries. Worlds that had been barren wastelands became gardens. Conflicts that had seemed unsolvable found resolution. The universe itself seemed more alive, more vibrant. Garland and Thelene married finally in a ceremony that was attended by beings who existed only as energy and consciousness, alongside others who were still flesh and blood. Vorthak served as ring-bearer, a job that required specially reinforced rings, but which he performed with great dignity. They had children not quite human, not quite Zithran, but entirely themselves. These new beings grew up in a universe where species barriers were curiosities rather than divisions, where the only wars were mock battles staged for entertainment. Vorthak lived to see the first of their children take his place as a guardian. A new generation that would bridge whatever species the alliance might encounter in the vast unknown. On his last day, the great beast lay in the garden of their house on New Harmony, surrounded by all those he had helped bring together. Thank you, Garland whispered, stroking the massive head. For everything. Vorthak opened one eye, looked at him with ancient wisdom, and made a sound that might have been laughter. Then he was gone, passing peacefully into whatever realm the keepers inhabited. But death, they discovered, was just another transformation in the alliance. Vorthak's consciousness joined the greater network. His memories preserved his wisdom, available to all who needed it. He was still there, still protecting, still bridging, just in a different way. Garland lived to see his great-grandchildren spread across the galaxy, not as conquerors, but as gardeners, helping other species join the growing alliance. When his time came, he was ready. Thelene beside him, his family around him, and the consciousness of the alliance embracing them both. His last thought was of that first moment when Vorthak had responded to his command. How impossible it had seemed then, how inevitable it seemed now. Everything had led to this. Every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of pain and joy. As he passed into the larger existence of the alliance, Garland felt a familiar presence beside him. Well done. Vorthak's consciousness touched his. The bridge is complete. And somewhere in the vast network of connected beings that spanned the galaxy, the last keeper smiled with infinite satisfaction. The family was whole. The circle was complete, and the real adventure was just beginning. The Alliance continued to grow, welcoming new species, sharing their gifts, bridging differences that once seemed insurmountable. And at the heart of it all, the story of a human who had once despised an alien queen and a guardian beast, who had somehow known they belonged together. It was a story told to children of 100 species as they played in gardens that bloomed across the galaxy. A reminder that sometimes the greatest things came from the most unexpected connections. And in the quantum fields that connected all consciousness, three friends, Garland, Thelene, and Vorthak, continued their conversations, planning new adventures in realms yet to be explored, secure in the knowledge that family once found could never truly be lost again. The war that had lasted 20 years and cost millions of lives was barely a footnote in galactic history now. What mattered was what came after the choice to build, rather than destroy, to unite, rather than divide, to remember rather than forget. In the end, it turned out that the alien queen's guardian beast hadn't just responded to one human voice. It had responded to the voice of possibility, the call of connection, the ancient song that had always hummed beneath the surface of reality. And across the galaxy, that song played on, carried by children who would never know the word enemy, only the word family. The Alliance endured, flourished, and somewhere in the vast network of consciousness that connected all life, Garland smiled as he watched new species take their first tentative steps toward joining the greater family. After all, every beginning was just another chance to build bridges. And bridges, as Vorthak had known all along, were what the universe was really all about.